She bought her first plane ticket with food stamps. Now, at 65, she was being dragged off a first-class seat she paid for. Evelyn Carter, CEO of a billion-dollar tech company, said nothing as security approached. She just smiled and whispered, "You're making a mistake." What followed would shake the entire airline industry. A quiet black woman, decades older than the average executive, became the face of a revolution in the skies. Before we begin this powerful story of injustice, power, and redemption, drop a comment. Have you ever been judged by how you look? Let's talk. Evelyn Carter boarded Flight 722 with the quiet elegance of a woman who no longer needed to prove herself. At 65, she moved with the confidence of someone who had scaled mountains others couldn't even see. Her navy blue suit, pressed to perfection, whispered power. The custom leather bag she carried wasn't just designer. It was history, a gift from her late mentor after she rang the NASDAQ bell for Neuralcore's IPO. She didn't expect the morning to be easy. Air travel never was for women who looked like her, not in America. But today was important. She was flying to Denver for a closed-door summit on ethical AI regulation. Government officials, think tanks, titans of industry. Her presence wasn't requested. It was required. Her name carried weight now, or so she thought. When she arrived at the gate, the boarding agent scanned her ticket and smiled. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Carter. We've upgraded you to 2A, our most requested seat in first class. Please enjoy the flight." Evelyn nodded politely, took her pass, and walked down the jet bridge. It was early, and first class was still empty. She placed her bag in the overhead bin, settled into 2A, and pulled out her annotated briefing packet. She had 10 minutes before wheels up to mentally rehearse. She never made it past the first page. "Excuse me," a voice interrupted. Sharp, young, female. Evelyn looked up. A flight attendant in her mid-20s stood over her with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her name tag read Laura. "I'm sorry, but you may be in the wrong seat," Laura said, tone clipped but courteous. Evelyn blinked slowly. "This is 2A, yes?" "Yes, ma'am, but this seat is usually assigned to one of our Diamond Platinum members. Would you mind showing me your boarding pass?" Evelyn handed it over without hesitation. Laura glanced at it, her smile tightening. She leaned over slightly and tapped her earpiece. "Can you confirm an override for seat 2A?" she whispered, barely audible. There was a pause. Then she straightened. "I'll be right back," she said, and disappeared down the aisle. The cabin was filling now. White men in tailored suits. A couple in their 40s, both with Louis Vuitton carry-ons. No one looked at Evelyn, but everyone noticed her. Minutes later, Laura returned, with a second attendant, this one male, and a stockier man in a blazer who looked like he belonged more in a casino than a cockpit. "This is Mr. Whitmore," Laura said. "He's our Diamond Elite flyer and has logged over 2 million miles with us. He's sat in 2A for the past 12 years. The man didn't offer a greeting. He simply looked at Evelyn, then at the crew. "I always sit here," he said. "Everyone knows that." Evelyn looked at him for a moment, then back at Laura. "Are you suggesting my assigned seat will be changed? For tradition?" "It's just a mix-up," Laura said quickly. "We can offer you another seat in first class. Still very comfortable." Evelyn didn't raise her voice. She didn't frown or argue. She simply smiled. A small, closed-lip smile that didn't reach her eyes either. "This isn't my first rejection," she said softly, her voice steady. "But it might be my last." The words hung in the air. Laura hesitated. So did the male attendant. Mr. Whitmore simply scoffed. "I don't have time for this," he muttered. "Just get her moved." "We'd be happy to compensate you with a voucher," Laura added quickly. Evelyn didn't move. The first-class cabin had gone silent. Someone in 2D shifted uncomfortably. Another man pulled out his phone. A woman across the aisle was pretending not to listen, but her knuckles were white against her designer clutch. Evelyn adjusted the cuff of her jacket. "I have a paid seat. I have an assignment. If there's been an error, it is not mine." Laura turned to the male attendant. "Get security." "Wait," someone said. Everyone turned. A younger black man in 1B had spoken up. "I saw her boarding pass," he said. "She's in the right seat." Laura's jaw tightened. "Sir, please stay out of this." But it was too late. The atmosphere had shifted. Yet Evelyn shook her head slightly at the young man. "Don't," she whispered. "It's not your battle." Minutes later, 2 airport security guards arrived. "Ma'am, we've been asked to escort you off the aircraft," one said. Evelyn looked at them, then at the crowd watching silently. She gathered her papers, zipped her bag, and stood. "I hope one of you has a phone ready," she said, her voice still calm. "Because someday, someone will ask how this started." No one spoke. As she stepped into the aisle, she turned toward Mr. Whitmore. "Enjoy your seat," she said gently. "I hope it's as comfortable as your conscience." And then she walked. The aisle seemed to stretch for miles. Each step felt like a chapter from her past. Years of being dismissed, ignored, overlooked. From being the only black woman in the MIT lab to being mistaken for catering staff at tech conferences. From being called aggressive for speaking up to being told she was too old for leadership by a man 20 years younger. The cameras were rolling now. Passengers recorded discreetly, or not so discreetly. Laura stood frozen by the cabin door. The male attendant looked away. Mr. Whitmore was already sipping his complimentary champagne. Evelyn exited the aircraft with the grace of royalty, head high, shoulders straight. In the terminal, she sat quietly as the guards radioed in. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The internet would speak for her, and it would roar. Evelyn sat in the dimly lit lounge of Terminal C, away from the noise and buzz of hurried travelers. The velvet upholstery on the armchair did little to ease the weight pressing down on her chest. She crossed her legs slowly, adjusted the scarf around her neck, and opened her phone. She scrolled past the notifications, tweets, tags, videos already picking up traction. Her removal had not gone unnoticed, but it wasn't time to lean into the noise. Not yet. She dialed the number she'd used fewer than a dozen times in the past decade. The man on the other end never answered unless it was truly urgent. The line rang once, twice. Then, "Evelyn," said a voice, smooth as aged bourbon and just as dangerous. "I assume you're not calling for small talk." "Franklin," she said calmly. "I was just escorted off a Titan Air flight. First class. I had a boarding pass, a paid seat. They removed me to accommodate a diamond flyer who claimed the seat as his personal property." A pause. "I warned you flying commercial wasn't safe anymore," he said, his voice dry. Evelyn stiffened. "Excuse me?" "You've built NeuroCore into a fortress," Franklin continued. "You sit on federal boards, you have private security, and then you choose to fly Titan, my airline, like some middle manager? You think they won't forget who you are the moment you stop reminding them?" "That's not the point," she said, sharper now. "They didn't forget, they ignored. There's a difference." Franklin exhaled slowly. "What do you want, Evelyn?" She hated the way he asked it, as though she was coming with a handout, not a demand. "I want you to tell me this will be handled, that there will be consequences." There was silence on the line. Not long, but long enough to sting. "You know how optics work. The flight crew said you were non-compliant. The passenger in question is a legacy investor. You want blood, it's going to cost political capital. I don't feel like spending on a social media storm." She almost laughed, but it wasn't humor that bubbled up. It was memory, cold and hard. "I see," she said softly. "I suppose I forgot how little some friendships matter when stock prices are involved." "Don't be dramatic," Franklin said. Evelyn didn't reply. "I'll look into it," he offered as a concession. "But if this is going to be one of your crusades..." "It's not," she cut in. "It's a reckoning." She ended the call before he could respond. She sat still for a while, long enough for the anger to rise, crest, and recede. Then, without a word, she reached into her bag and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook. The pages were faded, but the ink still sharp. It had traveled with her since her days at MIT. She opened to a page dated September 1981. Rejected. Again. Third time. The scholarship committee said my background wasn't a fit for the program ethos. What does that mean exactly? That I'm too black? Too female? Too poor? She traced the lines with her fingers. Her younger self had been raw, angry, brilliant, impatient. She remembered the meeting with the committee chair, a white woman in her 50s with icy pearls and a clipboard. "You're very impressive, Evelyn," the woman had said, almost kindly. "But perhaps you'd feel more comfortable in a community college environment. MIT can be overwhelming." Evelyn had smiled and thanked her, then gone to the campus library and printed her transfer application to Stanford, where she would go on to graduate top of her class. She flipped to another page, dated 1994. They told me I wasn't founder material, that no one would invest in a software company started by a single black woman over 30. I asked if they'd prefer if I got married to give them a face they could trust. She remembered that day too. A VC had actually laughed when she walked into the pitch room, assuming she was there to serve coffee. She'd walked out without finishing the presentation. The next week, she liquidated her retirement and started Neural Core in her apartment, alone. Now, she sat in a first-class lounge, more successful than most people would ever dream, and still, being told she didn't belong. She closed the notebook gently and looked around. No one met her gaze. Across the lounge, a wall-mounted screen played muted news footage. A senator embroiled in scandal. A wildfire in Arizona. Stock tickers rolling red. She picked up her phone again, not to call, but to record. She turned the camera to herself. Not polished, not rehearsed. Just raw. "My name is Dr. Evelyn Carter. I'm the founder and CEO of Neural Core Technologies. This morning I was escorted off a Titan Air flight despite having a valid first-class ticket. The crew chose to believe that my presence was a mistake, and that a man's memory was worth more than a black woman's paid seat." She paused. "I'm not sharing this because I want sympathy. I've endured worse. I'm sharing this because every day, people who don't have my platform are being erased, displaced, and silenced. And I am, frankly, tired." She ended the video. No edits, no filters. She uploaded it to her personal account with a caption, "If it can happen to me, imagine what happens to the ones with no voice. This is still America." Then she turned off the phone and sat back. Outside, the sky had gone from cloudy to full sun. Her next flight wouldn't board for hours. But Evelyn wasn't in a rush, because this time, she wouldn't be flying under anyone's radar. By the time Evelyn reached her hotel in Denver that evening, the world had already chosen sides. Her phone, even on silent, pulsed with notifications. The video she'd posted in the lounge had been viewed over 4.2 million times. It had been reposted by celebrities, tech journalists, and advocacy groups. Twitter had turned it into a rallying cry. Hashtags like "She Paid Too," "Flying While Black," and hashtag "Age Bias" were trending across the US. But the support was not universal. Cable news anchors, carefully coiffed and relentlessly cheerful, approached the situation with balance. A clip from a popular morning show played on a screen in the hotel bar as Evelyn walked by. According to Titan Air, the passenger in question refused to follow instructions from the flight crew and created a disruption. While we respect her position as a leader in tech, no one is above airline policy. Then came the talking heads. We're seeing this more often. Powerful people playing the victim card for clicks. Maybe it wasn't about race or age. Maybe she just didn't like being asked to move. We have to ask, was this really about injustice? Or is it a calculated PR stunt? Evelyn stood frozen in the hotel lobby, watching strangers discuss her dignity like it was a game of chess. A male anchor on another screen gestured dramatically. "This woman is a billionaire CEO. She's not Rosa Parks." The guests nearby didn't recognize her, or pretended not to. She could hear their murmurs. She didn't look like a CEO. I mean, why not just switch seats? She was probably difficult. She stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the 14th floor. The doors closed, but the pressure in her chest remained. In her suite, Evelyn dropped her bag gently onto the couch. She stood by the window and watched the city lights flicker beneath the descending dusk. It hadn't taken long, less than 12 hours since her forced removal, and already the narrative was shifting, from a victim of discrimination to an angry old woman causing drama. She poured herself a glass of still water, refusing the minibar's temptations. Alcohol dulled the mind, and Evelyn needed hers razor sharp. The news was already hitting neural core stock. Her general counsel had texted an hour earlier. Media attention is spooking investors. Board wants to know your endgame. Endgame. As if this were a marketing stunt. A ploy. A brand activation. She'd been dragged off a plane and told to sit somewhere more appropriate. And now they wanted to know if this was strategic. Her inbox was flooded with PR advice from image consultants. Frame the issue as ageism. It's more palatable than race. Play the grace card. Let the airline apologize and move on. Wear softer colors in your next public appearance. One even dared to suggest she dye her hair a warmer shade to appear less intimidating. Evelyn slammed the laptop shut. She had built neural core from the bones of her own failures. She had walked into VC meetings with no entourage, no seed money, no white co-founder to vouch for her. She'd coded the first product herself, pitched it from conference rooms and diner booths, until someone finally saw the vision. And now, one entitled man, one smug flight attendant, one biased news cycle, and it was all being chipped away. She paced the room, thoughts spiraling. She had expected backlash, but she hadn't expected the loneliness of it. Not one message from Franklin since the call. No statement of support, not even a private text. Her own board at NeuroCore had been silent. Her CFO, Jasmine Hall, usually fierce, loyal, outspoken, had sent a single line. Just let us know when it's safe to talk publicly. Even her mentees, dozens of brilliant young women she'd nurtured over the years, had gone quiet. Some had reposted her video, yes, but in group chats, no one reached out. And suddenly, Evelyn understood. Power didn't protect you, it isolated you. She sat down at the desk and pulled out her journal again. Not the public one, the real one. Page dated, October 2011. They called me difficult in the boardroom today. Said I intimidated the new director. I said nothing louder than he did. I wore the same suit I always wear, but somehow I was the problem. She read the next entry. Investor walked out of pitch meeting when I mentioned I was 52. We don't invest in founders past their prime. Prime for what? Making babies? Am I expired like yogurt now? Her pen hovered, and then she wrote, Tonight, they tried to make me feel small again, but I remember the girl they laughed out of MIT. The woman who was told to be grateful just to be in the room. I didn't survive those years to shrink now. Her phone buzzed again. CNN had posted Titan Air's official statement. While we regret any discomfort caused, the safety and compliance of all passengers is our top priority. The passenger in question refused to follow flight crew instructions and was removed in accordance with federal aviation guidelines. They had thrown her to the wolves. She stared at the screen. Her hands did not shake. Her eyes did not water. But somewhere in her chest, something cracked. Not broken, just split. Like the earth before an eruption. She reached for her phone again and opened a new video. This one wasn't calm. It wasn't graceful. It was steel. Titan Air has accused me of being non-compliant. Let me be clear. I was silent. I was polite. I followed every instruction until I was told that tradition and privilege mattered more than my paid ticket. And when I refused to give up a seat I had every right to occupy, I was dragged out. That is not policy. That is erasure, and I will not be erased. She posted it with no caption. Let them write their headlines. She would write the future. By noon the next day, Evelyn Carter's second video had eclipsed her first. In less than 24 hours, her name trended across every major platform. Editorials began to shift tone. Billionaire tech CEO removed for refusing to move for white frequent flyer became Titan Air faces growing backlash. An op-ed in The Atlantic asked, "Why do we still question who deserves first class?" Even the White House press secretary had been asked about it during the morning briefing. "We expect all Americans to be treated with dignity, regardless of status, race, or age," she'd said carefully. "We'll be watching developments closely." It was only then, that Franklin Rhodes called again. Evelyn let the phone ring twice before answering. "I assume you've read the headlines," she said flatly. "I've done more than read them," Franklin replied, the slick charm back in his voice. "I've spoken with Titan's board. The crew's being reviewed, PR's drafting a new statement, and I've arranged for you to be reboarded immediately. Private escort, expedited security, the works." "How thoughtful," she said. "You should know," he added. "Preston Whitmore's team has gone silent, likely lawyered up. But this can be salvaged." Evelyn paused. "Salvaged," she repeated. "You think I'm trying to salvage my image?" Franklin chuckled. "I meant for Titan." "Of course you did." 2 hours later, she stood once again at the boarding gate, this time flanked by 3 airline executives, a security escort, and a PR coordinator named Mitch, who looked like he hadn't slept. "Dr. Carter," Mitch said, all strained smiles. "On behalf of Titan Air, we want to deeply apologize for yesterday's misunderstanding. We're pleased to invite you back aboard and ensure your comfort and dignity are fully respected." She said nothing. The gate agent scanned her reissued boarding pass. 2A once again displayed in bold letters. But Evelyn noted the tension in his fingers, the flicker of discomfort behind the smile. No one here was relaxed. Everyone was calculating. As she walked down the jet bridge, the flight crew stood at attention just inside the cabin door. A different team. All new faces. No Laura, no Jason, no Susan. The airline had apparently swapped the entire roster. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Carter." The new lead attendant, a middle-aged Asian woman with a calm, composed air, greeted her. Evelyn gave a nod, but when she stepped into the first-class cabin, her gaze dropped instantly to seat 2A. Preston Whitmore sat there. Again, reading the Wall Street Journal, legs casually crossed, his glass of champagne already half full. He looked up and smiled as if nothing had happened. "Oh," he said with mock surprise. "You're back." She stopped. So did the crew behind her. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was confused. Eyes darted between Evelyn and the occupied seat. The lead attendant stuttered, "Ma'am, I was told—" "I see," Evelyn said, calm as glass. "So, you were told I would have 2A. Yes, absolutely. It's right here on your map. But he is sitting in 2A, she said, without looking at Preston. Whoa, we're resolving that. Mitch jumped in from behind her, fumbling for his phone. It was a systems glitch. I promise. No need, Evelyn said. I can already see how much has changed. She turned to the attendant. What seat am I being offered instead? The woman hesitated, then pointed toward 3C. It's still in first class. The amenities are identical. Ah, Evelyn interrupted. So I'm being offered a different seat, in the same class, as a gesture of goodwill, as a compromise. Preston gave a soft chuckle. You're really going to make this a thing again? Evelyn turned to him, her expression utterly neutral. I'm not making anything. You are. And then she looked around the cabin. Passengers watched, some with phones, others with studied disinterest. No one spoke. She took a step back. I appreciate the apology, she said clearly, her voice reaching every corner of the quiet cabin. But this isn't about seat 2A. It never was. She reached into her bag, retrieved her boarding pass, and handed it, gently, to the lead attendant. I decline your offer. But, Dr. Carter, Mitch began. "I will not be used as an apology," she said without raising her voice. "Not while the problem is still sitting comfortably in my seat." She turned, walked back up the jet bridge. Each step was soft, but they landed like thunder. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She simply walked, away from the noise, away from the cameras, away from the table she was being asked to sit at as if it were some benevolent gift. Back in the terminal, Evelyn found an empty bench near the large glass windows overlooking the tarmac. She sat, closed her eyes, breathed. No staff chased her this time. No offers were repeated. For once, the world let her exist on her own terms. Her phone buzzed. An email from her assistant. Subject: Press Inquiry. Dozens want a statement. Below it, a forwarded message from the New York Times editorial board. Another from Bloomberg Tech, and one unexpected one from the Smithsonian Institute. They wanted to interview her about the intersection of power, legacy, and visibility. She smiled, tired but unbowed. The world thought the story was over. They had no idea it had only just begun. 3 days later, Evelyn Carter sat in the penthouse conference room of a law firm overlooking Bryant Park. Rain traced slow, elegant lines down the window pane, casting moving shadows across the table where she waited, arms folded, still and resolute. At exactly 10 a.m., the door opened. Clara Martinez entered like a storm in heels, shoulders back, suit flawless, tablet in hand, expression unreadable. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled into a tight knot, and her eyes swept the room like they already owned it. Evelyn stood to greet her. The handshake was brief, firm. No small talk. "You're the last person I expected to call me," Clara said as she sat down. "And yet you're here," Clara smirked. "Let's not pretend we're old friends." "We're not," Evelyn agreed. "But we respect the same battlefield." A beat passed. Then Clara leaned forward, eyes sharp. "What do you want?" Evelyn opened her leather folder and slid a document across the table. "Not a lawsuit," she said. "Not yet?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "Then why me?" "Because I don't need a lawyer," Evelyn replied. "I need a weapon." That made Clara pause. "Go on." Evelyn's voice was calm, measured. Titan Air's offense was obvious. The removal, the replacement, the statement. But what they really did was reveal the system. "I don't want a settlement. I want a structural reckoning. I want public commitments, training overhauls, a third-party oversight board, equity audits, a passenger rights charter." Clara leaned back slowly. "You want to remake an airline? I want to force a reckoning that goes beyond Titan." Clara's fingers tapped against her tablet. "That's not litigation. That's policy. Culture, PR, that's war." "I've fought wars before," Evelyn said. "But this time, I want a general beside me." The room fell quiet. Outside, the rain had turned to sleet. 12 years earlier, Clara and Evelyn had met under very different circumstances. Opposing sides of a federal class action case involving biometric data privacy. Evelyn, then CEO of a rising AI firm, had defended her company's algorithms. Clara had represented a coalition of watchdog groups. The courtroom exchange had been brutal, technical, strategic, unrelenting. In the end, Evelyn won the case, but not without scars. Clara had never forgotten how Evelyn, during closing statements, quoted Zora Neale Hurston, "If you are silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it." Now, sitting across from her again, Clara saw something different. Not just a business titan, but a woman who had been wronged personally and refused to let it slip quietly into memory. "I'll need full access," Clara said. "Your documentation, the video archives, communications from the airline, the public statements. Done. And no interference when I go public with demands. I won't sugarcoat this for shareholders." "I expect nothing less." Clara nodded slowly. "And what do you plan to do while I go for the jugular?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Build the post-war world." The next 48 hours moved like a metronome ticking toward eruption. Clara moved fast. She published an open letter in the Washington Post, co-signed by 14 civil rights organizations, demanding Titan Air admit to discriminatory practices, fire responsible executives, establish an independent oversight panel on passenger treatment, create mandatory anti-bias training across all ranks, release anonymized data on passenger ejections by race, gender, and age. She held a press conference on the steps of a Manhattan courthouse. Titan Air's apology means nothing without transformation, she declared. We don't want discounts or optics. We want infrastructure. Evelyn stayed silent. She didn't need to speak. Clara was the sword now. She would be the architect. But that didn't mean Evelyn wasn't moving. She met privately with leaders from 3 major airlines. One-on-one conversations. No cameras, no hashtags, just quiet influence. She pitched them an idea, the Equity Sky Protocol, a cross-industry standard for fair treatment driven by data, rooted in policy, and designed to prevent future Titan-like disasters. 2 of the CEOs were interested. One asked if she was starting her own airline. She didn't answer. Back at Clara's office, the air buzzed with tension. Legal aides ran depositions. Analysts dissected Titan's internal memos. Clara's team uncovered an internal Slack exchange between crew managers the day after Evelyn's removal. One line stood out. If she wasn't trying to make a scene, why'd she post a video? The implication was clear. The company saw Evelyn not as a victim, but as a threat, a disruptor, a narrative risk. Clara leaked it anonymously to a journalist at ProPublica. The headline dropped the next morning. Titan Air knew and didn't care. That night, Evelyn received a call from Franklin. She let it ring, then picked up. "You've made your point," he said. "I'm not finished." His voice tightened. "You're destabilizing a billion-dollar company." "No," Evelyn said calmly. "I'm revealing what was already unstable." He exhaled. "You're going to force the board's hand." "That's the idea." A pause. "Just remember," Franklin said, voice quieter now. "If you push too far, they'll look for ways to push you out." Evelyn didn't flinch. "They've tried before." She hung up. Later that night, Evelyn stood in her apartment, watching the city below. She thought of Clara, once a rival, now an ally. She thought of Preston Whitmore, still silent, still smug. She thought of the flight attendants, the passengers who said nothing, the executives drafting half-hearted apologies. She thought of her mother, who'd worked 3 jobs and still walked her to the library every weekend. And she thought of the millions who didn't have her voice, her platform, her reach. She wouldn't just strike back. She would redraw the battlefield. It was nearly midnight when Clara Martinez burst into Evelyn's office unannounced. She didn't knock, didn't wait. She marched in holding a flash drive in one hand and a stack of printed screenshots in the other. "I found something," she said, out of breath but burning with focus. "And it changes everything." Evelyn, still in her slate gray suit from the day's back-to-back strategy calls, looked up from her desk with only a flicker of curiosity. "Sit down." Clara didn't. She inserted the drive into Evelyn's laptop and brought up a grainy video clip. Interior footage from a Titan Air crew training session, time-stamped 8 months ago. Evelyn leaned forward. The screen showed a group of flight attendants laughing during what appeared to be a break. The camera angle was skewed, almost accidental, but the audio was clear. "Honestly," said a young woman, Laura's voice unmistakable, "if we started booting every pushy old lady who thinks her platinum card makes her royalty, we'd fly half empty." Laughter followed. "I still can't believe she called corporate on me just for asking to see her boarding pass," someone else said. Then came the voice of a man, low, amused, and familiar. "Some of them forget first class doesn't come with a crown." Evelyn froze. "Is that Preston?" Clara nodded grimly. "Same voice match from a podcast interview he did last year. I had a tech forensic team isolate it." Another voice chimed in. "Let's not pretend they don't get entitled, especially the ones with a narrative. Black, older, female. Some think the world owes them." The room fell silent. Evelyn closed the laptop. How did you get this? A whistleblower, junior technician in Titan's training department. She found it while pulling unrelated footage for review. Evelyn pressed her palms together. You're telling me the woman who removed me from my seat is the daughter of Martin Hill, Clara finished, holding up one of the screenshots. Board member, second largest shareholder in Titan Air. And Preston? Clara held up another, a headline from 5 years ago. Titan Air executive faces discrimination allegations, no action taken. Preston's face was in the thumbnail, arms crossed confidently in a boardroom. Internal complaint from a black employee, claims of verbal abuse, dismissed within a week. Guess who the HR manager was back then? Evelyn didn't answer. Clara tossed another document across the desk. Laura. The implications were volcanic. The entire encounter, the removal, the silence, the pre-assigned seat, wasn't just incompetence or oversight. It was protectionism. It was the company shielding their own, and now the world would know. But Evelyn didn't rise from her chair, didn't pace, didn't shout. She sat still, the storm behind her eyes gathering strength. Clara waited. What do we do? Evelyn finally asked. I say we go nuclear, Clara said. Leak everything, drop the video, force the board to purge itself or collapse under public pressure. Evelyn tilted her head. And what if we do something unexpected? Clara narrowed her eyes. Like what? Evelyn stood and walked to the window. The city lights blinked beneath her, distant and indifferent. I want to speak, she said. To whom? To Laura. Clara blinked. Are you joking? I want to offer her an option, Evelyn said calmly. A very public one. Clara crossed her arms. You're going to forgive her? No, Evelyn replied. I'm going to strategize her. The next morning, Evelyn called a press conference. She didn't tell Clara exactly what she planned to say, only that she'd trust her instincts. Reporters packed the hall. Cameras clicked like insects. Evelyn stepped up to the podium in a deep blue dress. No notes, no script. Before we discuss lawsuits and policies, she began, I want to talk about patterns. She recounted the story of her removal. The second boarding, the empty apology, the occupied seat, the silence. Then she paused. And now, she said, I want to talk about forgiveness. A murmur rippled through the room. I've learned that my flight attendant, Laura Hill, is not just an employee. She's the daughter of a Titan Air board member. And I've learned that her decision that day may not have been hers alone. She scanned the room. I am not absolving her, but I am offering her something better than absolution. Accountability. Reporters leaned in. I am inviting Ms. Hill to meet me. On camera, in conversation, no scripts, no handlers. I want her to tell the world what she believed that day and what she believes now. Gasps echoed. One journalist stood and asked, Is this part of a settlement? No, Evelyn said. It's part of a system shift. Later that evening, Clara barged into her office again. You blindsided me. Evelyn handed her a cup of tea. And yet, we're trending again. You offered a stage to the person who humiliated you. I offered a mirror, Clara. Let's see if she can look into it. Clara stared for a long moment. Then, slowly, a smile crept across her face. You're dangerous, Evelyn Carter. Evelyn raised her cup. Only to people who think I'm not. The ballroom at the Midtown Civic Center was meant for galas. Gilded ceilings, chandeliers dripping with crystal, polished floors that reflected every camera flash like starlight. But on this day, Evelyn Carter repurposed it as a courtroom. Not one of judgment, but of truth. A stage was erected at the front, simple and stark. A single podium, a projection screen, and 15 empty chairs arranged in a semicircle. No brand banners, no PR slogans. Just silence and the steady hum of anticipation. It was Evelyn's idea to call it the passenger testimony. This wasn't about her story anymore. It was about everyone else who'd been erased with less attention, fewer hashtags, and no recourse. At 9 a.m. sharp, Evelyn stepped onto the stage. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, except for a thin bracelet engraved with the initials of her late mother. Her voice, when it rang out, was low, but unwavering. "Thank you for being here," she began. "I've spoken a lot these past few days, but now I'd like to listen." She clicked a remote in her hand. Behind her, the screen lit up with a single sentence: "You're in the wrong seat." Gasps echoed through the audience. Evelyn waited. "This is the phrase I heard before being removed from a seat I paid for," she continued. "But I've since learned I wasn't the only one. In the days following that flight, I received thousands of emails. I read every one," she paused. "And today, I've invited just a few of those voices to speak." The first to take the stage was a middle-aged man with a weathered face and trembling hands. His name was Kenneth Moore, a retired firefighter from Georgia. "I was traveling to bury my brother," he said softly. "I had a business class seat. I sat down, and within minutes, a crew member asked me to double-check my boarding pass. No one else was asked, just me." He looked down, then added, "I was wearing my old station jacket. Maybe that made me look out of place." Next came a young Latina teacher named Rosa Alvarez. "My students raised money to send me to an educational summit," she said. "First time I ever flew. When I got to the gate, they told me my ID didn't match. It did. I'd just gotten married the week before and updated my name. They made me wait. I missed the flight." Her voice cracked. "I cried in the airport bathroom for an hour." Story after story followed. A Sikh man detained for random screening 8 times in 1 year. A pregnant woman denied pre-boarding because her belly wasn't big enough to prove. A veteran in a wheelchair asked if he could transfer himself without help. But it was the final speaker who silenced the room completely. Her name was Mrs. Thelma Monroe, 83 years old. Dressed in a lavender suit, her hat adorned with a single silk flower. Evelyn helped her to the stage personally, offering an arm. Mrs. Monroe took her time. When she reached the podium, she pulled a folded boarding pass from her purse and held it up. "This," she said, voice clear, "was my ticket. Seat 3C, first class. I saved for it for years. It was a promise to myself. One last trip to see my childhood home in Birmingham before my legs gave out." She held the ticket higher. "But when I boarded, the flight attendant looked at me and said, 'Ma'am, economy is back that way.'" Gasps rippled through the room. "I told her I had the right seat. She laughed, said I must have misread, asked me to step aside, and then she gave my seat to someone else." Mrs. Monroe paused. "I was too tired to argue. I sat in the back. My legs swelled so bad I couldn't walk for 2 days." Her hand trembled slightly as she returned the boarding pass to her purse. Then she looked directly at the cameras. "I didn't tell anyone because I thought maybe it was my fault. But then I saw Miss Evelyn's video, and I realized, we all been told to sit where we don't belong." The room was silent. And then, quietly at first, someone began to cry. It spread like rain. Soft sobs, wiped eyes, tissues passed hand to hand. Evelyn stepped forward again, her voice no longer quiet. "This is not just an Evelyn Carter problem. It's not just a Titan Air problem. This is what happens when bias becomes infrastructure, when politeness replaces justice, when corporations believe silence equals safety." She turned to the press. "I won't accept their voucher. I won't accept their apology. What I demand is structural change. For me, for Mr. Moore, for Rosa, for Mrs. Monroe, for the people who aren't in this room because they were too afraid, too tired, or too used to being dismissed to speak." She looked into the sea of cameras. "We don't want compensation. We want recognition, and we want protection." That night, the headlines were unmissable. "Passengers speak out at Carter's hearing. We've all been told to move." "Titan Air faces class action momentum as public testimonies go viral." 83-year-old woman breaks down. "We all been told to sit where we don't belong." Social media exploded again. but this time with clips not of Evelyn, but of them. The passengers, the silenced, the ones who had never trended, never testified, never been believed. Until now. Backstage, Evelyn embraced Mrs. Monroe. "Thank you for speaking," she whispered. The old woman smiled, eyes glistening. "Child, thank you. I never thought anybody would care what happened to me in row 3. Evelyn looked her in the eye. "I care, and now, so does the world." The resignation came at dawn. A 3-sentence press release, buried beneath headlines about stock slumps and investor walkouts. Titan Air announces the immediate resignation of CEO Patrick Langley. The board thanks Mr. Langley for his service. A search for new leadership is underway. There was no press conference, no farewell statement, just silence, and the sound of markets reacting. Titan Air's stock dropped 14% before noon. By afternoon, it had triggered a halt in trading. And still, Evelyn Carter said nothing. She was in her kitchen when the news broke, pouring a mug of black coffee, the morning sunlight filtering through sheer curtains. Jasmine Hall, her CFO, called first. "They're going down hard," she said. "Langley's out. Half their board is in emergency session. Do you want to comment?" "No. You're trending again." "I'm always trending lately." "Evelyn," Jasmine said cautiously, "they're talking about naming you interim CEO, or at least putting you on the board. It's being discussed behind the scenes." Evelyn took a slow sip of her coffee. "I'm not interested in becoming the face of someone else's cleanup," she said. "Then what do you want?" Evelyn stared out the window. "To break the mirror, they keep trying to dress up." Within the hour, her assistant forwarded a formal invitation from Titan Air's remaining board members. "Ms. Carter, in recognition of your leadership, insight, and public trust, the board of Titan Air invites you to join as an independent director to assist in guiding the company towards systemic change." The language was polished, careful, hopeful, but Evelyn knew what it really was: damage control. That evening she stood at a podium again. Not in a courtroom, not at a protest, but at a business summit where she had already been scheduled to speak months prior. The timing was serendipitous. The audience included executives, policymakers, and investors, many of them previously tight-lipped about the Titan scandal. Now, they leaned forward. Evelyn stepped into the light and paused before speaking. "I've been offered a seat," she said plainly, "on the board of the company that removed me, then denied me, then invited me back in a moment of panic." She scanned the room. "Some of you may think I should accept, that I could do more from the inside, that I could fix it." She smiled, softly. "But I've been inside systems my whole life, as the only one, the first, the token, the example. And what I've learned is this: a single seat at the table is not transformation, it's camouflage." The room stilled. "So no," she said, her voice rising. "I don't want a seat. I want a mirror, held up to this industry, this culture, these policies that dress up exclusion as logistics and bias as tradition." Gasps echoed. Some clapped, then stopped, unsure if it was appropriate. Evelyn continued. "I don't want to inherit a broken house. I want to change the zoning laws." Now the applause came, unprompted, loud, and sustained. That night, 3 of Titan Air's top institutional investors pulled out. A Saudi conglomerate froze future contracts. A Fortune 100 tech partner suspended all joint advertising. A viral thread on X, formerly Twitter, laid out 15 other discrimination incidents involving Titan staff over the last decade, all swept under the rug. By midnight, #Boycott Titan had overtaken the Super Bowl pre-hype in national engagement. Inside Titan's Manhattan headquarters, the atmosphere curdled. Mid-level managers resigned preemptively. An anonymous employee published an open letter titled, "We Knew." Even the janitorial staff was fielding press inquiries, and at the center of it all, not Evelyn Carter. She was already looking ahead. At Neural Core, Evelyn met with her leadership team. "Titan will try to rebuild," her CTO said. They'll look for a figurehead, someone safe. Let them, Evelyn replied. We're not playing in their sandbox. We're building our own. Jasmine looked up from her tablet. Do you want to make a formal statement about declining the board seat? Evelyn paused, then said, No. Let the silence speak. Across the industry, the effect was immediate. Other airlines scrambled to review policies. One released a diversity report within 72 hours. Another quietly offered vouchers to 3 previously ejected passengers. But the public wasn't satisfied. They wanted transparency, change, names, and they wanted Evelyn to lead it. Back at home, Evelyn stood on her balcony. The city stretched out below her like a live circuit board. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt awake. This wasn't the end of something. It was the unmasking of everything. Behind her, on the coffee table, sat a letter from a 14-year-old girl in Milwaukee. Dear Ms. Carter, I saw your video. I didn't know people still got treated like that. My grandma says it's always happened, but I thought it would be better by now. I want to be an engineer, but sometimes I feel invisible. Watching you made me feel seen. Thank you. Evelyn folded the letter carefully and placed it in her notebook. Then she whispered to herself, No seat, but finally, some space. The invitation arrived in a cream-colored envelope, hand-delivered by a Department of Transportation liaison wearing a navy suit in visible discomfort. Evelyn opened it at her kitchen table, her hands steady, her morning tea still warm beside her. Dr. Evelyn Carter, the United States Department of Transportation, in coordination with the Office of Civil Rights and the President's Advisory Board on Equity, formally invites you to serve as Senior Civilian Advisor for the newly formed National Airline Reform Commission. Your leadership in corporate ethics, technology, and passenger rights is not only welcomed, it is needed. The letter was signed by the Secretary of Transportation. Later that day, Evelyn sat in the quiet corner of a botanical garden surrounded by green, her sanctuary. The offer weighed more than she expected. It wasn't about prestige, it was about scope. She'd fought battles before, courtroom skirmishes, investor duels, political stonewalling. But this was a battlefield made of bureaucracy. To win, she'd need more than sharp words and good press. She'd need someone who knew the inside of the machine, its blind spots, its rituals, its habits. Someone who had once been part of the problem. That night, she made a call she hadn't made in 2 decades. The voice that answered was older, wearier, but unmistakably familiar. Hello? Miss Grant, Evelyn said evenly. It's Evelyn Carter. Silence. Then, a sharp inhale. Evelyn, I didn't expect... No, you didn't, Evelyn said. But I have a question. 20 years earlier, Susan Grant had been a flight attendant on a transcontinental flight from San Francisco to Washington, D.C. Evelyn had boarded with a first-class ticket and a migraine. She'd requested water and silence. Susan had responded with a frown and a condescending tone, questioning Evelyn's seat assignment twice during boarding. Later in the flight, when Evelyn asked for a blanket, Susan had said, in a voice just loud enough for other passengers to hear, Maybe next time book business class if first is too much. Evelyn hadn't said a word back, but she had remembered. Now, Susan sat across from her at a quiet cafe, nervously stirring cream into a cup she hadn't sipped from. I was wrong, she said softly. I was younger, stupid, full of my own self-importance. And if I made you feel... You didn't make me feel anything I hadn't felt 100 times before, Evelyn interrupted gently. You were just the latest face of a very old voice. Susan's eyes watered. I've thought about that moment more times than I can count. Evelyn leaned in. Then I have an offer for you. Susan blinked. I've been asked to help rebuild this system, Evelyn said. But I don't want to do it with lawyers and consultants who've never rolled a cart down a crowded aisle. I want someone who knows what it's like to say the wrong thing and learn from it. You want me to work with you? Susan asked, stunned. I want you to help me build something better, something honest. Susan was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'd be honored. The announcement hit the media like a thunderclap. Carter accepts federal advisory role. Names former flight attendant who once discriminated against her as key partner. The public reaction was mixed, some calling it radical forgiveness, others branding it naive. But Evelyn didn't care about headlines. She cared about impact. She and Susan began crafting what they called the Empathy Protocol, a training and certification framework designed not just to teach compliance, but to reshape the human experience of flying. Where existing programs focused on checklists and legal coverage, theirs focused on discomfort, humility, and lived experience. Their first session was held at JFK International Airport's training center. 50 flight attendants from various airlines sat in silence as Susan stood before them and said, "20 years ago, I embarrassed a woman in front of strangers. Not because of policy, because of my own assumptions. She's the reason I'm standing here now, and the reason I know we can do better." Evelyn stood next, holding no notes. Some of you might wonder why I forgave her. I didn't. Not exactly. I just realized the world doesn't change when we crush every mistake. It changes when we transform it. The room erupted in applause. Tentative at first, then louder, then standing. Over the next 6 months, Evelyn and Susan trained over 1,000 airline employees. The program was adopted by 2 major carriers. By month 8, it became a federal recommendation. By the end of the year, Evelyn testified before Congress. When asked by a senator why she'd chosen to work with someone who once humiliated her, Evelyn replied, "Because redemption isn't just possible, it's necessary. If we don't allow people to come back from failure, we're only building systems of fear, not of justice." One evening, as they rode in the back of a government SUV en route to DC, Susan turned to Evelyn. "I used to resent you," she admitted. "Not because of what happened on that flight, but because you never responded. You never fought back." Evelyn smiled faintly. That was the fight. They drove in silence for a moment. Then Susan said, "Thank you for not letting that be the last page of my story." Evelyn looked out the window, watching city lights blur into one another. "It never is," she said, "unless we stop writing." The training session had ended hours ago, but the conference room remained lit. Evelyn Carter sat near the window, watching the moonlight stretch across the glossy table, her fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. The room was quiet now, the kind of silence that follows exhaustion, but also something deeper, anticipation. Susan Grant stood at the other end of the room, arms crossed over her chest, as if shielding herself from something colder than air conditioning. She had been pacing for 10 minutes, stopping, starting, saying nothing. Finally, she spoke. "I need to tell you something," she said. Evelyn didn't look up. "You've told me a lot already." "Not this." Evelyn raised her eyes slowly. Susan stepped forward and sat, her movements stiff like someone lowering themselves into a memory too painful to carry. "It wasn't just the water and the blanket," she said. "It wasn't just the tone or the seat." Evelyn waited. Susan's hands trembled slightly as she reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, old, frayed, worn at the edges. She laid it on the table and slid it toward Evelyn. "I kept this for years. I shouldn't have, but I did." Evelyn opened the folder. Inside was a printed incident report, a flight number, a date, a short, clinical summary. Passenger, Carter, E. Flight 607 route BOS to ATL. Status, removed pre-departure. Reason, crew discomfort and potential escalation. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She remembered that flight. Of course she did. It had been years ago, early days. She was traveling to pitch her first AI prototype to a group of skeptical investors in Atlanta. She was running on 2 hours of sleep, an old laptop, and the last of her startup grant. She'd boarded the plane quietly, taken her seat, opened her pitch slides, and then a flight attendant, Susan, had approached. "Ma'am, are you sure this is your assigned seat?" "Yes." "We've had some concerns." "From who?" She was asked to step off the plane. No one looked at her. No one intervened. She remembered standing at the gate afterward, watching the plane pull away, her briefcase at her side, her shoulders trembling with a humiliation that felt radioactive. That pitch never happened. That funding round collapsed. She had almost quit that week. Now she looked down at the report. Her name. Crew discomfort. Susan was crying now. I wrote that, she whispered. I was new. The supervisor told me to put something safe, something that wouldn't raise flags. So I wrote that you were non-compliant and abrasive. Evelyn didn't say a word. I didn't even believe it, Susan continued. But it was easy. You were young, black, confident. You made people uncomfortable without saying a word, and I didn't have the courage to stand in that discomfort, so I made it yours. Evelyn closed the folder. The silence was thick, but not angry. It was something else, older, heavier, a reckoning. Susan wiped her eyes. I thought if I buried it deep enough, it wouldn't count. But the truth never disappears, does it? It waits. Evelyn finally spoke. You know what's funny? She said softly. I blamed myself for that day. For years. I thought I had done something wrong. That I had been too direct. Not friendly enough. That maybe I did look like I didn't belong. Susan looked up. I'm so sorry. Evelyn nodded slowly. I don't forgive you, she said. Susan froze. Evelyn continued. Because this isn't about forgiveness. It's about truth. Forgiveness implies a resolution. This, she tapped the folder. This was a fracture, one of many. You didn't start it, but you continued it, and now, she paused. You can help me end it. Susan blinked. What do you mean? Evelyn smiled gently. You helped me build resilience. Now help me rebuild the sky. In the days that followed, Susan became not just a co-trainer, but a co-creator. She told the story of Flight 607 at every session, unflinching. She didn't sanitize it. She didn't soften her language. She admitted to weaponizing protocol, to shielding herself behind policies instead of people. And something remarkable began to happen. Other attendants stepped forward. A man from Dallas shared a story about accusing a Middle Eastern passenger of acting suspiciously because he was praying. A woman from Miami confessed to assuming a young black woman in first class had stolen someone else's boarding pass. They weren't proud of their stories, but they were finally telling them. Because Susan had made it safe to say the worst thing and still choose to grow from it. Evelyn watched it all quietly. She didn't rush to center herself in every room. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. A reminder that dignity could be reclaimed, even from ashes. One day, after a particularly emotional session, a young flight attendant approached Evelyn in tears. I was the one who recorded your removal, she said. I was in the last row. I didn't say anything that day. I just filmed. Evelyn looked at her gently. You spoke when it mattered, she said, and now you're here. That evening, Evelyn and Susan walked together along the Hudson, the city glowing behind them. You know, Susan said, I never thought this would be my life. I was just trying to survive in a system that didn't want either of us. I know, Evelyn said. I still don't understand why you chose me. Evelyn looked at her. Because you didn't hide, she said, and because you said the truth out loud. Susan nodded. Do you think we're making a difference? Evelyn didn't answer right away. Then she smiled. I think the sky's quieter now. They walked on. Two women who had once stood on opposite sides of shame, now rebuilding the very air between them. The conference room at NeuroCore's headquarters wasn't built for policy meetings. It was designed for code reviews, product demos, machine learning forecasts. But now, the walls were covered with flowcharts, behavior matrices, and ethics diagrams written in red marker. Evelyn stood at the head of the room, Susan to her right, and across the table sat NeuroCore's senior engineering team, diverse in age, background, and brilliance. They weren't here to build software. They were here to build accountability. This isn't just about AI, Evelyn began. It's about awareness. repetition, pattern recognition. Bias doesn't live in policies. It lives in micro-movements, in tones, in who we believe without question and who we doubt without cause. Susan added, "We're not here to punish. We're here to observe what has never been recorded, what it feels like to be erased in a cabin full of people pretending not to see." Heads nodded, not just in understanding, but in determination. The project was called SkyScan. Within weeks, Neural Core had prototyped a lightweight AI framework capable of analyzing cabin interactions through 3 lenses: behavioral tone tracking, subtle voice shifts, escalated pitch, abrupt language changes. Interaction mapping, who gets questioned, interrupted, ignored. Passenger reporting, anonymous, secure, real-time feedback via a mobile app synced to Flight ID. The app was simple. Passengers could log in, enter their seat number, and tap one of 3 buttons. Something felt unfair. I was treated differently. I witnessed a problem. Each entry remained anonymous, but once cross-referenced with time-stamped crew logs and onboard audio recordings, the AI could identify patterns invisible to the human eye, and more importantly, it could reveal them. Evelyn insisted on 3 conditions before deployment: transparency. Every airline must publish monthly summaries of behavioral bias data. Consent. Crew and passenger privacy must be protected. The AI would detect systems, not shame individuals. Agency. Airlines couldn't suppress or edit the data. It would live on an open-access federal dashboard. 3 airlines agreed to pilot the system: 1 regional, 1 national, and, unexpectedly, 1 international carrier headquartered in Canada. "I never thought I'd see the day," Susan muttered as she and Evelyn watched the first test flight take off from LAX. Evelyn didn't smile. "Neither did the passengers who came before us." The results came quickly, and they were jarring. In the first month, 28% of reported unfair interactions involved requests to recheck boarding passes, primarily toward women and people of color. 17% of all complaints noted delays in service to passengers with disabilities. Multiple logs cited crew members calling passengers emotional or difficult when they voiced basic concerns. But the real shift wasn't just in data. It was in response. Crew members who had previously never been challenged began reconsidering tone. Supervisors reviewed incident logs weekly. Flight attendants requested additional empathy training on their own. Something unseen was beginning to take shape. Not fear, not compliance, but consciousness. News outlets called it the Carter Protocol. Tech publications dubbed SkyScan a breakthrough in ethical AI. Senators praised its balance of rights and reform. And most unexpectedly, passengers started using the app not only to report mistreatment, but to commend fairness. Attendant went out of her way to help an elderly man with dignity, noticed and appreciated. Gate agent re-verified my seat, but did it with such respect that I felt seen instead of profiled. These weren't just improvements in service. They were shifts in culture. One afternoon, Evelyn and Susan visited a training session at a small airline in Oregon. After the class, a young black flight attendant approached Evelyn. "My mother told me your story," she said. "When I got this job, I was afraid I'd have to just keep my head down. But now I think I can help set the tone instead of just surviving it." Evelyn smiled, deeply moved. "That's exactly why we built this." By the 3rd month, the system had collected over 30,000 anonymous passenger entries. Trends emerged. Some airports were repeat hotspots for bias incidents. Certain flight routes showed higher disparities in how passengers were questioned or seated. And most critically, the data didn't just expose airlines, it revealed habits. The industry began to respond. 2 airlines changed their pre-boarding scripts to remove coded language like "our usual premium flyers." Another introduced peer review among flight crews. Team members would evaluate each other's tone and demeanor post-flight. The transformation was slow, but it had begun. Not in press releases, not in hashtags, but in the subtle daily ways people were finally being seen. Back at Neural Core, Evelyn reviewed the first quarterly Skyscan report with her team. "This doesn't just protect passengers," said an engineer. "It protects everyone from a culture of assumption." Evelyn nodded. The goal was never perfection. The goal is evolution. Susan, reviewing the data beside her, added, "For the first time, when someone says, 'I was treated unfairly,' we have more than silence to answer them with." At a press conference later that month, a reporter asked Evelyn, "Do you think this system will fix the airline industry?" She paused. "No," she said. "Technology doesn't fix people, but it can remind them. And sometimes, that's how change begins." 1 year later, the world looked different. Or maybe, finally, visible. The airline industry had not become perfect. Prejudice didn't vanish overnight. But change had rooted itself deeply, slowly, stubbornly. Evelyn Carter had stepped back from the limelight after Skyscan's full rollout. Her name was still invoked in articles, case studies, and university lectures. She had been offered awards, honorary doctorates, even a talk show slot. She declined most of them. But today, this flight was different. Today, she would fly not as a protest, not as a witness, not even as a reformer. Today, she would fly as herself. A woman, a builder, a survivor, a chairwoman. The terminal buzzed with life as Evelyn approached Gate 22. Her assistant had offered to walk her through, but she declined. She liked the feel of airports, the choreography of strangers with destinations, the quiet urgency of boarding calls and final check-ins. Her steps were calm, her gate pass digital. As she reached the front of the line, a uniformed attendant at the jet bridge looked up and smiled warmly. "Dr. Carter," she said, "we've been expecting you." She extended an arm. "Welcome aboard, Madam Chairwoman. Your seat is waiting." The phrase lingered in the air, gentle but powerful. Madam Chairwoman. Evelyn had accepted the honorary role on Skyscan's Independent Ethics Council 6 months ago. It was a position with no stock options, no speaking circuits, just oversight, insight, and authority to hold the system accountable. She didn't sit on the board of an airline. She oversaw how they treated people. It was a seat with no aisle, but far more gravity. Inside the cabin, Evelyn was greeted by a young crew, diverse, bright-eyed, alert. They didn't ask to take photos. They didn't gush. They simply nodded with quiet respect as she passed, proof that reverence doesn't have to be loud to be felt. She took her seat. 2A, not as a symbol, not as redemption, but as a traveler. She placed her bag down, settled into the leather, and looked out the window. The sky outside was soft with morning, pale blue, brushed with cloud wisps. It had been a long road, a long flight, in truth. But she was still ascending. As passengers boarded, a small envelope was handed to her by the lead flight attendant. No stamp, just her name written in pink gel pen. To Dr. Carter. From a girl who needed your story, curious. Evelyn opened it. Inside was a folded letter, written in large, careful handwriting on notebook paper, hearts drawn in the margins. Dear Dr. Carter, my name is Talia. I'm 12. I saw your story in class last week. My teacher said we should learn about people who changed rules without yelling. I like that. My mom is a nurse. She used to work on planes, but said people were mean sometimes. She told me you made it safer for women like her to go back to work. I think that's brave. I don't know if I want to be rich, but I want to be respected. And now I believe I can be respected even before I'm rich. Thank you for making that feel possible. Love, Talia J. Evelyn read it once, then again, and again, each line a weight, each word a soft, persistent echo of everything she had endured. Talia didn't talk about power, she talked about dignity. And that, Evelyn realized, was the true legacy. Not policies or protocols, not positions or hashtags, but belief. Belief planted in the heart of a 12-year-old girl who now imagined herself treated with care, even when she had no title, no wealth, no right to be listened to, except her humanity. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, smooth and warm. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for choosing Horizon Pacific. We're honored to welcome a very special guest aboard today. Dr. Evelyn Carter, your work has lifted us all. This flight's for you. A few passengers looked around, recognizing her now. One woman smiled softly and mouthed, "Thank you." Evelyn nodded back, not in grandeur, but in quiet understanding. As the plane began its slow taxi, she looked once more at Talia's letter, folded it neatly, and placed it inside her travel journal, next to the first boarding pass she had ever been handed. The one she kept from that night so long ago, when she'd been escorted off the aircraft and humiliated for simply existing in the wrong place with the wrong skin and the wrong gender and the wrong silence. That day, they had tried to make her invisible. Today, the world called her chairwoman, but more importantly, today, a girl she'd never met believed she was worthy. As the plane lifted into the sky, Evelyn pressed her hand gently to the window, watching the horizon blur and stretch. The clouds moved beneath her now, and she whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to herself, "We didn't change the world. We just reminded it who it could be."